Hello everybody and welcome back to the Better Happy podcast hosted by myself, Mike Jones. So today we are going with episode 8 of the podcast. So we're 8 episodes in and the title is How Managers Can Engage and Not Hate Their Teams. So a bit of a provocative title, how can we not hate our teams? But any of us that have been in a leadership or management role know that we go through periods where we just can't stand our team. It drives us insane and it would just be easier to do everything ourselves. I know I've been there in my very first business. I remember going through those exact thought processes, and most of the managers that I work with have been through or are going through the same trouble. So what we want to get to is how can we actually engage our teams? How can we make our teams want to be at work and want to work hard for us? And of course, how can we have a positive relationship with us, so with them? So that's the key, isn't it? That's what we want to get to. That's the holy grail. Teams that want to work hard for us, and teams that we get on with, so that our job as a manager or leader is actually easier. We can do what we're good at, which is set the direction and make sure that we get really good results throughout the business or the team. And we can spend less time firefighting and dealing with issues, which is what nobody wants to do. And when we do this, management and leadership turns into an enjoyable, fulfilling role. But when we don't do this, management and leadership is stressful and hard work. It feels like an uphill journey. The analogy that I like to use is that when you're not getting it right, it feels like a lonely uphill journey. And when you're getting it right, it feels like an enjoyable team challenge. So it's still challenging, business and running a team. But if you get it right, it's something where that challenge is actually a rewarding thing in our lives. Whereas if you get it wrong, you feel like you're on your own, you against the team, and it's this uphill slog of a battle. So it is absolutely possible for managers and leaders to get on with their teams, and for teams to work hard and want to work hard for their managers and leaders. And it's possible in any industry. It doesn't come down to you can only do this in industries where people are paid, the highest going wages or salary. That's not true at all. So don't get stuck in the belief mindset that you can only have an engaged team that want to work for you if you're paying sky high wages. And if it was true that people didn't care about work and didn't care about work that maybe isn't high paid, then we'd have no voluntary sector, and we'd have no school system or no jobs where people don't get paid big bucks. Everybody would just be working in high paid industries. So people are very motivated to do a good job, and it's not only in high paid industries. So get that out of your head right away. Now there's two types of manager really in my mind, and of course you can argue that there's more, but let's just say that we all exist on this spectrum, and the spectrum is kind of how empathetic and emotional we are. So on one end of the spectrum, we're highly empathetic and highly emotional, and we really are sensitive to how our team's feeling. So if we're at that end of the spectrum, chances are that we're going to lead by being too nice, and we're not going to want to put any pressure on our teams. We're not going to try and get them to do anything new because we just want to keep them happy, which is a mistake. And then if we go right to the opposite end of that spectrum, we've got the blunt manager, and this is the person that's just focused on the results and can't be asked for people not getting on with it, or any of their personal issues, or dealing with stress. So for us, or for that type of manager, it's just do this, get on with it, and when people don't listen to you, you feel frustrated. So I'd say that we all exist on somewhere on that spectrum between being purely results focused and blunt, to being highly emotional and really just caring about how our team feel. And the problem is that if we're at either end of that spectrum, it's not good for the team and it's not good for us. So what I'm going to do is give you 6 tips to help you kind of not be at either end of those spectrums. So it doesn't matter if you are super blunt, it doesn't matter if you're the super emotional manager. With the right approach, you can still be a fantastic leader or manager. You've just got to think about it slightly differently and have some tips to help you. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to give you 6 tips to help you engage your teams and for you to have a better relationship with them. But before we do that, I just want to start with some mindset shifts. So when you are thinking about stuff, you've got to get into the right mindset. And I've got a few points here just to walk you through. So the first one is, employees, generally speaking, will have a different mindset to leaders and managers. Now, of course, they might be leaders and managers in training, but generally speaking, and business owners, but generally speaking, employees are different to leaders, managers, and business owners. They have different motivations. I went for many years ago for a job with a guy who owns a farm and owns a few companies. And this guy's, he's a typical farmer. He's very wealthy. This business has done very well for him. And he works all day, every day, like farmers do. And the reason he seemed like a great guy, and it was a nice team and nice people and relatively well paid. But the reason I didn't go for this job is it was expected that you work 6 days a week and 10 hours a day at least, so 60 hours. And that's just the cultural norm. And what I thought to myself when I left was that he doesn't get that his motivation for running this business as hard as he does is it's essentially making him a millionaire. But for the employees, it's different. They're getting paid less. You get paid less to be an employee. And that means that part of what you expect from that is decent work-life balance. And why not? So why would I want to work the hours that you work? So you've got to think that your employees and your team members are generally wired differently to you. They've got different motivations to you, and that's fine. Because if everybody wanted to be a manager, if everybody wanted to be a leader, if everybody wanted to be a business owner, we wouldn't have any teams. So that's the key mindset piece to take in, that they do think differently to you, and that's okay, that they don't think the same as you. And if you're getting frustrated with them because they don't think the same as you and they haven't got the same work ethic as you, you're not going to get anywhere. You can't just get frustrated with people for being different to you. It's good that they're different. You've just got to figure out how to speak their language and how to get them bought into your way of thinking. So that's the key mindset shift to bear in mind. And this is why personality profiling is good, and all these other different systems that we can use to profile people, motivators, personalities, strengths. These are good because they help you and your team realize that you're all different, and that means that you think in slightly different ways, got different strengths, and you communicate in different ways. So bear that in mind, and don't forget that they are different to you. They've got different motivations to you, probably getting paid less than you. So you've got to motivate them in different ways to what motivates you. So let's go through 6 tips to help you actually do what we're talking about here, to help you engage your team and to actually have a positive relationship with them. So what do we mean by engage your team? We mean get them to want to work hard. Okay, so point number 1 is to sell your ideas to your team. And what we tend to do when we're in leadership and management positions or business or we're business owners is we come up with ideas, we spend loads of time thinking about them, we do loads of research, we get really excited, we see the opportunity, we run to our teams and then right, here's this new great thing that I've thought about that we're going to do. It's going to make the business amazing. Here you go, and you're met with blank faces, or even you're met with resistance, and it drains you and it drives you insane because you're like, this is such a good idea. Why are you not as excited and passionate as me? I haven't got the energy to try and motivate you to do this. You just need to be more like me. And again, it comes back to the previous point, doesn't it? It comes back to my point that they've got a different mindset to us. And ultimately, a good idea to you is just more work for your team. So you've got to think about how you're motivating them into that. So you've got to sell them the idea. So you've got to think about, how do I get my team to buy into this idea? And there's lots of different ways that we can do this. And obviously, one of the ways we can do it is with money. So it depends on your business and the thing that you're doing. So one way could be money, that you incentivize them to buy into this idea and make it a reality. But that's just one way. And actually, most people in the UK, and I know this from doing tons and tons of motivational mapping profiling, most people aren't highly motivated by money, believe it or not. People are much more motivated by meaning and purpose and by being connected to others. So you've got to think about, how do I get my team to buy into this idea? So put yourself into their shoes, think about what drives them at work, and think about how you can get them to buy into it. Often the way you're going to get them to buy into it is by making it very clear to them how this new idea is going to benefit them in the long run. But whatever your new idea is, it's going to take effort, and it's going to, because of that effort, it's going to require buy-in. So you have to sell them the idea. So that might be showing it how it's going to benefit them. It might be financially. It might be rewarding them with time off. It might be showing them how it's going to benefit your clients or your customers. You've got to think about what motivates them and how you can get them bought into it. If you don't sell them the idea, you're just going to get met with resistance, because normally it's more work for them. It's new stuff they've got to take on, and they haven't been involved in the process, so they just resist it. So just make peace with that. They're not just going to take your ideas and run with it. Number 2 then, which leads on nicely from point number 1, is involve your team in your strategy. So I was doing an interview probably about a year ago now with a guy called Nicholas Wardle. You should follow him on LinkedIn. He's a very renowned employee engagement specialist. And he said something that's always stuck with me, and it's that people hate having change done to them, but people love change if they're involved in it. So people hate having change done to them, but they love it if they're involved in it. And this is so important, and I see this all the time now when I'm working with teams and working with businesses. And when the management or the leadership team or the business owner comes up with this idea and just throws it at the team, even if it's a great idea, they don't like it because they weren't involved in it, and it makes them feel not valued and not appreciated. In fact, I've been in this position. I worked for a really good business in Australia many years ago after I was travelling. Fantastic business to work for, great culture, lovely guys, really looked after the team. And they were trying to improve efficiencies in the warehouse, and they brought in a specialist. And much of what this specialist came up with was good, but at least 80% of what the specialist came up with, we had already suggested in the warehouse or talked about as a team. So even though all these changes were good, actually everybody in the team felt disengaged by this process because they hadn't been involved and hadn't been asked. And the indirect message that sent to the team was, we don't value your opinion, we don't think you know what you're talking about. So then you've got the negative impact of the team not feeling bought into or valued, and then you've missed out on all those free ideas, and you've had to go and spend money to find them anyway. So involve your team in your strategy. Now, what I'm not suggesting is that you get your team to write, the 1 year strategic plan for the business, but just think about what the objectives of your team are, what you'd like them to be for the year, and get them involved at that level. So if you've had objectives passed down from the business, well, and then you've got to turn those into actions in your team. Get your team involved in those actions. Ask your team on a monthly or quarterly basis, what can we do to improve things? Have you thought of any ideas around how we can make that thing better? If you involve your team in the strategy process, even if they don't come up with all the ideas and you still come up with a lot of the ideas, and even if there's debate around the ideas, the fact that they've been involved, even if they don't get the outcome they want, means that they'll be way more bought into what you're doing as a team. So it takes a bit of time, it takes a bit of effort, and you might think, I haven't got time to go and spend time with my team to, talk about our objectives for the next quarter. But the buy-in that you'll get and the level of engagement that you'll get and the enthusiasm that you'll get moving forwards to implement these ideas will pay for itself 10 times over. So you have to involve your teams. And this is in any business, whether you're whether you're an accountant or a care home or a mechanics or a huge Fortune 500, regardless of the type of business, you should be trying to involve employees at every level. So point number 3 then is to have a set of values for the business or for your team, maybe both. But this is really important because what you want to do is get clear on what you want the culture to be in your team and how you want people to compose themselves and how you want your team to thrive. And you do that through a set of values. And once you've got your set of values, you then use those values, you put them up on the walls and you use them in employee check-ins and you hold people accountable to them and you hold yourself accountable to them as well. Every week at your team meeting, you talk about who's lived the values the best and you celebrate those successes. So you make it culturally normal that everybody knows what your team values are and that they're lived by. Now, again, this seems like effort, but if you do this and take the time to do this, what you do is you create a culture where it's very difficult for somebody to not live by those values. And if somebody does not live by those values, they're going to really stand out. And what that's going to do is save you tons of time in dealing with poor behavior and issues. Because if you don't have a set of values and you don't tell people what you want the behaviors to be, you just end up dealing with poor behavior all the time and getting frustrated and dealing with disciplinaries and dealing with in-house fighting and bitching and all this stuff that you can't be bothered to deal with, and neither can anybody else. So it's this kind of common notion that if you don't ask for what you want, you won't get it. So if you don't have a set of values, you're not telling your team how you do want them to behave. And all you're doing really is waiting for them to behave badly and then having to respond to that. So create a set of values. You should have between 3 and 7 values. You can work on your team with them. There's a guide on Better Happy around how to create it on the Better Happy website. But you've got to have values in place because it's going to save you time and it's going to help you attract the right people and it's going to help the wrong people wither themselves out. So you've got to have set values. So point number 4 is to create a culture where it's okay to make mistakes. If you've read Principles by Ray Dalio, you'll already have encountered this notion. If you haven't, I highly recommend reading it, although it's a very long read. But he, at his investment company, which has been studied by psychologists for having one of these kind of like best cultures going, one of these highest performance cultures going in any modern business, he has this notion that it's okay to make mistakes, it's not okay to make them twice. So you've got to make this culture where people feel safe to make mistakes. And Matt probably needs to start with you. If you're fearful of making mistakes, that's going to be the culture you're creating for your team. But there's going to be one part of your brain that says, well, I don't want people to make mistakes. And I try not to make mistakes because mistakes are bad. So why should I make it okay for that to happen? And kind of at a logical level, that might make sense. But if you think about the long-term outcome of that, it really doesn't make sense. And the long-term outcome is that if everybody's fearful of making mistakes, nobody takes any risks, nobody makes any decisions, nobody tries to do anything new. So your team gets stuck in the same routine. You have to make all the decisions yourself. You don't develop, you don't try new things, you don't evolve as a team. and it just gets stale and miserable, and you don't feel like your team are empowered and they don't feel empowered, so you just have to do everything yourself. So if you're not allowing people to make mistakes, it's crap for everybody involved. Your team end up just feeling crappy and not trusted. You end up feeling tired and burnt out, and it all comes through fear. It all comes from this fear of making mistakes, and that we think it's going to reflect badly on us. Not making mistakes but having a stagnant culture, a stale culture, and a lack of evolution is much worse than making mistakes on the way to becoming something fantastic. So you have to embrace that mindset. If you want to get to being incredible, getting amazing results, being transformative, you're going to have to go through mistakes. You're going to have to make peace with it yourself, and you're going to have to allow your team to make mistakes too. If you start doing that, everything will grow. The team will start to feel more confident. They'll start doing stuff without you. You won't feel like you've got to respond to every single situation that's going on with your team. Everything just gets better. Probably one of the hardest things to do, and one of the things that teams struggle with the most are managers, but you've got to do it. It's the only way to get towards success. Which leads us to point number 5 then, and that's having a vision. So you've got to have a vision, and we're very taught, especially in the UK, but probably in most developed countries, we're very taught to be reactive. So stay within the line, follow the proven process, and just be reactive. And that is a very miserable place to be. It's not good for your business. It's not good for your team. It's not good for you, because you end up being fully reactive. What you need to do is you need to create a vision. What do we actually want to achieve? Okay, so whether that's in the business should have a vision. If it hasn't, that's something that needs to be addressed. But even in your team, what are we going to achieve this year? What would an incredible year look like if we do everything we want to do? You know, how has the business changed? How are our customers' lives better? How are our employee lives better? What improvement have we made in the business if we do what we want to do? And this requires big long term, no holds barred, creative thinking. So don't go in there and be like, well, that's not realistic because of A, B, and C. You've got to put all that stuff to the side and give yourselves permission to be creative and just come up with these incredible ideas as a team. So in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, whatever works for you, if we just did everything we wanted to do, how has our business transformed? How has the department that we're in transformed? How have we completely changed the way things happen? So obviously it's going to be specific to your role and to your department. So it might be that you're going to improve customers' lives, and you can be clear on how that's going to be made. It might be that you're going to improve processes. It might be that you're making more money. Whatever, it doesn't matter, but you've got to have a vision that people are excited by. And if you've got a vision that you're excited by, that will then start to create the pathways to you for where you need to try new things and risk making mistakes. If you don't have that vision in place, just think about how your day-to-day is going to go. If you haven't got a vision of what you're working towards, you will just become a fully reactive team, and you'll spend all of your time every day responding to emails, responding to issues, and putting out fires. You'll just be a fully reactive team. And this actually feels safer in the short term because you're not having to make any decisions. You're not pushing yourself. You're not trying anything new. You're not making the risk of making mistakes. So it feels nice and safe and comfy. But in the short term, but in the medium to long term, it's going to feel miserable. Your team aren't going to feel fulfilled. You're not going to feel fulfilled. Work doesn't feel exciting. You don't feel like you're making any change. You just feel like you're there to react and respond to people, and nobody really knows what the purpose is behind what you do. So this is really common. This is a really common challenge, and it comes from, it stems from fear. Well, why would we not create a vision of what we want to achieve? And it comes from this fear that we might not achieve it, or we might make mistakes. But again, remember, the alternative is worse. Would you rather set a vision and make mistakes along the way and maybe not achieve it, but probably you will, but maybe not, run the risk of that? Or would you rather just not do that and just be a fully reactive team for the next 2-3 years and not go for any of that pain of making mistakes and going over hard hurdles, but everything's exactly the same as it was a couple of years ago? I know for me, I would much rather the first option of trying to make something happen, even if it brings pain with it. And here's the important thing: most of your teams will be exactly the same. Most of your team members want to know that they're making a difference and that they're inciting change. That's what makes them feel motivated. That's what makes them feel excited. So even though you might say, no, I actually prefer the second option of just playing it safe and just being reactive, you're going to have high employee turnover and low levels of employee engagement anyway, because it's not what gets people excited for work. Human beings are hardwired to want to make a difference. So even though in the short term, think back to the empathetic manager, even though in the short term people will resist ideas and big goals and change because it brings with it fear and fear. In the long term, that will always lead to them feeling disengaged and miserable and bored anyway. So you've got to find that healthy middle with taking risks and pushing yourselves and evolving. So that's points 1 to 5. So sell your ideas to your team. So number 2, involve your team in your strategy. Number 3, create values. Number 4, allow mistakes to happen. And number 5, have a vision. So then point number 6 is make sure that you're putting aside time for either development or social time or both. It's very easy to get stuck being busy in a business. All businesses are busy. There's always a never-ending to-do list of stuff to do. There's never enough time. So it's very easy to get stuck in that place of we haven't got time to develop ourselves or work or go on socials because we've got these really important tasks that need doing. But they're always there. So you've got to remember how human beings are hardwired again. And even introverted people that don't get their energy from socializing, they still need socializing. They still crave human connection, they still crave meaningful relationships, and they still crave feeling like they're getting better and developing. So if you're not giving your team time together to develop and work on things as a team and individually, and you're not giving your team time to socialize and to go and do stuff that's a bit of fun and actually have a bit of a laugh, what you're doing is you're removing that social connection piece, which is possibly one of the most valuable parts of giving somebody a job, actually social connection. So, and especially if you think about today with remote working and computer working and even when we're at work together physically, we're normally looking at computers and not actually communicating together physically. That's having a terrible detrimental impact on people's health and how people experience life and how people experience work. So yes, you're going to be busy and yes, you're going to find it hard to justify the time at the beginning, but you have to find time at least once a month, at least once a quarter to do some form of development and or social with your team. Obviously, this is different to different businesses and different levels of employment. So you've got to think about what's going to work for you. So what might work for my team might not work for your team, but you should be doing something. Otherwise, people just get fed up and bored. And again, you're going to find it hard to justify the time, but think about the loss of engagement and interest in the workplace you're going to have if your people are never developing or spending time together. That will eventually lead to low levels of employee engagement and high levels of employee turnover. Whereas if they're spending a bit of time together, doing something that helps them team build, doing something that helps them learn, you're going to get high levels of engagement, so it's going to pay for itself in productivity, and you're going to have reduced turnover of employees. So it's going to save you money in covering people when they're gone and all the costs that come with trying to find somebody new. So those are my 6 points for you to have a better relationship with your team, to engage your team and to not hate your team. Running a team should be a rewarding and enjoyable experience. Of course, it brings with it its challenges. It's not just a walk in the park, and anybody that says that's on a different planet. So it's not easy, but if you focus in the right way, it can be highly rewarding, and actually you can have better work-life balance and get better results through leveraging your team, and your team will be more engaged through that process. There's a really good analogy that I like that I think explains this really well. So think about your approach for your career or your business as driving a car, and your job as you change roles and go up in seniority and the business improves or the team improves, your job is to change gears to be in the appropriate gear for that speed that you're driving at. And if you think about what gets you started either in your professional career or your business career, tends to be being in gear one. So it's accelerating really hard, doing everything yourself, and just being everywhere all the time. And then as you start to get success and you start to generate more money and you start to have a team, or if you're in a bigger business and the business is growing and you've got a team growing around you, if you carry on trying to work in gear one where you're just doing everything, very quickly you're going to get tired and fed up. Your team are going to feel disengaged because you're not spending time to be strategic, to help them, to spend time with them, to help them plan, to help them develop. So they're going to feel disengaged and fed up. And you're going to stop getting as good results because it's all relying on you, because you're just going 100 miles an hour, but you're not actually leveraging the people around you. So what you've got to do as you progress is you've got to take your foot off the gas. You've got to put the clutch down and you've got to let everything just slow down for a minute, which feels very difficult because you're busy and you're making progress. And when you do that initially, you're going to have this kind of lull where you go down a little bit. So when you start relinquishing responsibility to your team if you're an entrepreneur, or when you start to take your foot off the gas if you're a manager and slow down a little bit, it's going to feel really uneasy. It's kind of as you're changing gear and it's kind of everything's coasting and it all goes a bit quiet, and you're going to be tempted to jump back to the way you were doing it before because it's stressful. But what you've got to do is step up into that new gear. Once you step up into that new gear and you start focusing on leveraging people and developing your team, and you give yourself permission to not just be busy all day every day, it will feel harder at first, and it's going to take more effort at first because it's not what you're good at yet. What you're good at is doing. So it's what happens when you go into that new gear. Actually, it takes a bit of time to kind of settle in. But once you do it and you stick to it and you start to get the results and you start to realise that actually your team's more than capable, and actually when you're not doing everything and you're spending time empowering other people, they're actually happier. They get on better with you and they get better results. When you do this, you slowly start to realise that, oh, I should have shifted gears earlier, and actually life is way easier. So a lot of this stuff around trying to engage a team and actually get on with your team is to do with your own mindset and giving yourself permission to adapt to the level that you are at. So having a highly engaged team that enjoy working for you and that you actually like is a perfect reality. It's not impossible. It's perfectly possible. What should I say? It's not perfect reality. It's perfectly possible. It just takes some mindset shifts from you. So just take that in mind. Think about those 5 tips, those 6 tips. Think about the mindset stuff I said at the beginning, that you remember that your team is wired differently to you. Think about how well you're implementing those things already or not. Which ones can you improve? Which ones can you start to make improvements in? And just remember that you, your teams, and your business are better happy.
Wanna hear you go.